So this position is already becoming very hard to defend, and here black actually made a decisive mistake by going for the queen trade with queen to b7. So amazingly, this is going to be a lost ending for black, as we'll see. Hey there! In today's game we're going to see probably the cleanest example of how having one slightly better piece than your opponent can decide the game even if you're materially down. And I want to start with this position, which might look dull at first sight. We might claim that white has a slight space advantage here with this pawn e5, but this pawn e5 is not the most important factor currently. This might look like a perfectly equal position, but in fact black has a problem to solve, which is this bishop on b7. This bishop on b7 is very passive there, it is being blocked by a pawn on c6, but black cannot go c5 quickly because white will simply capture that bishop on b7. That's why black tried the move bishop to a8. So now black has the idea to go c5 and activate this bishop on a8, which is currently not doing anything, but if black goes c5, it might become quite active. So this advantage might seem to be temporary, but let's try to get inside the head of white's player, who is the legendary former world champion Anatoly Karpov. Let's imagine that we manage to trade all pieces besides the bishops and the pawns. In that case, we will get this position where the difference of the two bishops here can be clearly seen. This bishop is attacking a pawn on c6. It has a lot of mobility, where this bishop on a8 is just defending a pawn on c6 and it only has one square to go. So here, the idea of trading all pieces would highlight this difference between the two bishops. And in fact, in this particular position, if it was white to play, white would simply go b4, and now there may be an idea of going b5, going for this pawn on c6, which in this position is pinned, so black cannot go c5, because white would simply capture the bishop on a8. So with that idea in mind, now we can understand Karpov's idea, which was to trade rooks. Both rooks were equally active, so this trade is fairly even, if we just take a look at the rooks. And here we went rook to d1, and then we got another trade. And now black is unable to go c5. Black again has this problem with the bishop, that it's locked in and very passive. So one may have simple ideas like going bishop to f3 and then go b4 and b5. But black is a very strong player. Black knew that he has to do something, otherwise he's gonna get a very bad position. So he tried to look for active counterplay. He went queen to d8, attacking the bishop, but also planning to invade on the second rank. So here white went bishop to f3. If white simply defends the bishop, then black will go c5, and black will be perfectly fine. So we see that these are very subtle ideas that white is playing to keep his advantage. So white went bishop to f3, again pinning this pawn on c6, c5 is not possible, so black has to do something, otherwise white will simply go b4 and b5, and then collect the pawn on c6, so black correctly went queen to d2, looking for counterplay, and here Karpov played a very deep pawn sacrifice, he went b3. If white simply defends, this might look attractive at first sight because black still has a problem with the bishop on a8, but now black can simply go back and then plan to go c5. So if white wants to get something more out of this position, he has to take some risks. So here Karpov went b3, sacrificing a pawn. Now that the queen is not controlling b4, now Karpov went b4, planning to go b5. So this position, even though white is a pawn down, it's already become tricky to play as black. By the way, here a6 would not stop this idea because white will simply go b5. Black can take with the a pawn, but after c takes b5, this pawn is going to fall. White is going to take with the b pawn and it's going to create a very advanced pass pawn. So here black tried a very interesting idea. So this was a very good game played by both sides. Black went queen to a1 and after king to h2, black went back with the queen to a6. And this would invite the move b5 even more because after b5, white would attack the queen in addition to the pawn on c6. But here black's idea would be to go back with the queen, and after pawn takes, try to hold this position. For example, black might get some air for the king by going h6, and now this pawn is pinned. White is definitely not worse here, but here is a matter of how white can progress, because this bishop on a8 now is making more sense, attacking this pawn on c6, and the queen doesn't have an easy way to move without white losing that pawn on c6. So Karpov was a very deep but also pragmatic player. He didn't want to rush in this position and he kept the pressure. Here he went queen to d4, planning to go queen to d8. This will give a checkmate and also attack the bishop on a8. Queen to c8 is pretty much the only move here. And now Karpov went c5, just fixing this pawn on c6. And after pawn takes, he took with the queen, and we get this funny situation where this pawn b4 is just controlling these two pawns. Neither the A or the C pawn can advance, so the position might be objectively holdable for black, but this is becoming very hard for black to play. Here the queen is attacking this pawn a7, also attacking this pawn c6, and the bishop is attacking c6 as well, where black's pieces are just very passive, just defending. Here black went a6, Karpov went queen to a7. In addition to having a very passive position, black is having problems here having sensible moves, so black has to be careful. For example, the queen has to guard the 8th rank. And here black tried g6, which is a move that I didn't like, just placing another pawn on the light squares, so black is creating weaknesses on the dark squares. Black could have tried queen to f8. If we get the queen trade as it happened in the game, it's going to be a better version for black if white trades queens. Although here white can try queen to a8, keeping the pressure, black can go back to c8 and try to hold this position. Because after g6, black is weakening the dark squares, and this is going to be very important as we see later in the game. Here white continues with the move h4. White is simply going to improve his position. Despite being a pawn down, it is only white the one who is trying to progress here. Now h5 might be an idea, that's why black went h5 himself. And here comes a very nice move, king to g3. The king is getting active. If we go for the ending, after the queen trade, the king is going to be ready to invade, and even with queens on the board, there might be an idea to bring the king to attack black. So this position is already becoming very hard to defend, and here black actually made a decisive mistake by going for the queen trade with queen to b7. So amazingly, this is going to be a lost ending for black, as we'll see. And here black had a few options to defend. The one that I like more is the active defense, which is queen to b8. Even though the queen might look passive on b8, here it is attacking pawns. So this would have held the position, although black still has to be careful. But just to give you an idea, after king to f4, here black can wait with king to g7. After queen to f6 and king to g8. Now black has the idea to take the pawn on b4. Or just to show you a funny line, if white gets too excited and goes king to g5, in this particular position, after queen takes e5, we get a very nice checkmate. So queen to b8 seems to be holding the position. So as I mentioned, a very important point is that the queen here is a very useful piece. It is attacking pawns. Normally a piece becomes strong when it is active. In this case it is not active, but it is useful and it is attacking pawns. And before I continue with the rest of the game, where black went queen to b7 and lost the ending, let me remind you that for the last few hours only, I'm giving you a massive discount on my complete course about chess strategy. In this course, I definitely talk about this idea that having the same material is sometimes not relevant at all if you have better pieces. I also evaluate more advanced ideas like how pieces change throughout the phases of the game. You will also learn a lot about material imbalances and other topics about chess strategy like pawn structures, having a better king, or strategic sacrifices. You will also practice what you learn in this course, so feel free to check the link in the description if you want to know more about these offers. So let's go back to the game where black could have held this position, which was very tough, with a move like queen to b8. Here he went queen to b7. It makes sense to exchange queens when you're a pawn up, but here black's pieces are so bad that even being a pawn up, black is actually losing this ending after queen takes and bishop takes. This pawn on b4 is controlling these two pawns, and after king to f4, white has a much better king. This king has an idea to either invade on the king side, but also to go to the queen side and then try to attack black's pawns. So here black tried king to f8. Here white went towards the king side by going king to g5. So king to e3 was also very strong. Just want to mention that white has to be tactically alert. Here king to e4, planning to go to c5, was actually very bad because after c5, black is given a check. Black will manage to exchange bishops and then take on b4. So this is actually winning for black. But instead, king to e3 with the idea of bringing the king to c5 and attack the pawns was also very strong. But Karpov had another idea in mind, which was to create a passed pawn. This is also another very important thing when you evaluate pawn structures that I cover very deeply in my course. So after king to g5, black went king to e7. We see a drawback of playing the move g6, that now these squares have become weakened, so the king is going to be very strong on g5. Karpov went bishop to e4. Here black waited with bishop to a8. If black moves the king, then after king to f6, this king is becoming even more active, attacking the pawn f7. So black waited with bishop to a8. And here comes the very important idea, f3 planning to go g4. bishop to b7 and g4. Here black gave the pawn on h5. In any case, after h takes and f takes, white is going to play h5 next and create a pass pawn on the h file. And we're gonna get something similar after bishop to a8, white took on h5. And here Karpov didn't rush taking on h5, which was possible, but he played f4. Black is simply waiting, and after bishop to f3, bishop to a8, king takes. In this position, black decided to resign. This pawn on the h file is going to be very strong, and if black's king tries to stop that pawn, then white is going to try to collect the other pawns. So hope that you enjoyed this very deep strategy game. Remember that if your pieces don't attack anything, they can be really useless. Even if your opponent is materially down, always try to get useful pieces that have targets. You can even be materially down and have a better position thanks to that. So that's it for now. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.